One of the most wonderful things of Salzburg is simply walking around. You don't really need to spend a lot of time at historic monuments or churches or whatnot. It's the town itself. It's the lanes, the alleys, the statues, the little squares and the plazas, the platzas, and the general ambiance of the place. By the university, there's an outdoor food market just in front of the Collegiate Church. It's the old site of the university, which has now moved outside of town. But the food market is here every day except for Sunday. So that's a fun place to do a little browsing, and you might just grab lunch on the run here. More than most European towns, Salzburg was founded and nurtured by the church. The Catholic bishops really built up this town, and in particular, the Dome, the great cathedral. It's the Collegiate Church. It was designed by Fischer von Erlach, one of Austria's most important architects. He designed many of Vienna's grand buildings and several real important churches here in Salzburg. The Franciscan Church is twice as old, with parts of it dating back to 1221. 300 years later, this Gothic portion was added, and 200 years after that, some Baroque elements were included in the church, such as the side chapel and particularly the main high altar by Fischer von Erlach, with a carved wooden Madonna masterpiece by Michael Pacher. So this church is so fascinating because it unveils the entire history of architecture from the early Middle Ages with the Romanesque, through the Gothic, into the Renaissance, and finally right up through the Baroque. So we see here about a 600-year span of art history, all in one beautiful building. The Franciscan Church was an important headquarters for the Franciscan order, and it's one of 4 main churches in town that's definitely worth visiting while you're in Salzburg. So be sure to pop in and have a look. It's very easy to find it right in the center of the old town. There it is. Everything is very close together here in the old town. As you can see, it's right next to the cathedral. And a third church just adjacent is that of St. Peter with its beautiful cemetery. This is a cloistered cemetery nestled up against the side of the cliff of the Monksberg, and it's a beautiful, well-kept garden. Lovely flowers, and it's one of the oldest active cemeteries in all of Europe. Castle towering up above it. And there's a convenient path that cuts right through the cemetery. You can go in through the front archway by the church, and you'll come out over by the funicular that goes up to the castle. Be sure to make that side trip, and then also, of course, while you're at St. Peter's Cemetery, you want to go inside St. Peter's Church to see the Baroque in full flower. One of the most elaborate of all of the decorated interiors of the city, Peterskirche. Here too we find a combination of architectural styles and a growing organic building that started out as a Romanesque basilica way back in the 13th century and has grown and been filled with beautiful carvings, statues, paintings, and architectural details that reflect the Renaissance and especially the High Baroque. This large organ was played by Mozart while he lived here, and he premiered his Mass in C minor on it. Crossing the river Salzach, great photo op as we go over to the right bank of the city. We're leaving the heart of the old town now to cross over, and there are certainly some things worth seeing on this right bank of the city, especially the Mirabell Gardens, the lovely grounds surrounding the Mirabell Palace. It's so pretty that we're going to spend the next several minutes of the program here with you, just walking through the gardens, looking at the fountains and the perspectives and the vistas with the castle up on the hill beyond. Checking out some of the locals who are out for their stroll. We're going to see some interesting activities coming up in just a moment. It's a very romantic place. Very active place for locals and visitors alike. take a stroll. You can sit on a bench, just listen to the fountains, and look at the palace beyond. Fascinating history here. It was built for that same archbishop who was responsible for the cathedral construction, Wolf Dietrich. He built it and the palace for his mistress. That's right, the bishop had a mistress and they had 15 children together. So they needed a big house. He lived up in the castle on the hill and also in his residence by the cathedral. But he built the palace for his lady. Catholic priests have never been allowed to marry, or bishops, but it had been a tradition back in those days, in the 1500s, to have a mistress for some bishops. Even some popes were known to have mistresses and children. So that's why these gardens and the palace were built. And then they were rebuilt over the years and redesigned and brought up to this beautiful condition that you see today. Fischer von Erlach played a major role in laying out the gardens. And then Lucas von Hildebrandt took over in the 1720s. He rebuilt the smaller palace into a larger Baroque building, and then he embellished the gardens. He's the same architect, von Hildebrandt, who designed the Belvedere Palace in Vienna. Lots of weddings take place here, especially on a weekend. It's a beautiful spot for it. And there's the Pegasus Fountain, one of the centerpieces of the Mirabell Gardens. The palace has become a municipal building, and one of its main functions is holding weddings upstairs. So it's really the most popular place in town for the wedding ceremony, and then for some photographs and a little bit of a reception out in the gardens right after. It's a lovely romantic scene, just similar to its romantic origins as a palace for the mistress of the archbishop. It's still floating along those same lines today. It's a happy place. What a spot for a photo opportunity and photo backdrop for your wedding shots. Romance is in the air here at the Mirabell. It's been rebuilt after various fires, but in World War II the U.S. Air Force bombed it and destroyed most of it. But the staircase was rebuilt in the original style. It's the cherub staircase from 1723, designed by Raphael Donner in an engaging, whimsical Baroque style. These putti, these little cupids in marble, make the most attractive stairway railing that you've ever seen. And it leads right up to the marble room where the civil wedding ceremonies are held. It's a nice stairway to climb, definitely worth your while. There was a number of cows on exhibit in Salzburg while we were there. This is quite a musical cow, which reminds us of Mozart. And the living house of Mozart is just over here on this side of the river, a few blocks from the palace. So let's have a look inside. This was the home of Mozart's father, and Wolfgang also lived here for a while and played on some of these clavichords and early pianos. There are some original manuscripts by Mozart on exhibit in the Wohnhaus, the Mozart living house, including a little scale model. Fischer von Erlach designed the Church of the Trinity, a foreshadowing of his Karlskirche, built 20 years later in Vienna. The other real interesting attraction of this side of the river is a viewpoint. It's worth the small climb up this driveway and up the steps and around the bend and through a wooded path. It's really a nice little walk up the hill, not bad. And the payoff is a jackpot. You'll be rewarded with one of the classic views of Salzburg. And it only takes 10 minutes to get up here, so it's certainly worth the walk. You'll see the cathedrals, the domes of the town below across the river, and of course the castle towering above it all on its rocky peak. It's just splendid. There are about 5 classic views in Salzburg. This is one of them. We've shown you some others already. The view from the castle itself is another. The view from the Mirabell Gardens is astonishing. The view from the Winkler Terrace is lovely, and the view inside the old town looking down the Getreidegasse is classic. But this view ranks with all of them. We're up at the Hetfer Bastion. This was built in the 1630s for the 30 Years' War, the religious battle between the Catholics. You can see the battlements there between the Catholics and the Protestants. And just below the hill is a lovely medieval section of town. And this staircase, it's called the Imbergstiege, connects up to that hill with the view. It's worth a little stroll along the Steingasse here on the right bank. It's a medieval canyon almost, with these ancient buildings and narrow cobbled pathway. And then it's an easy walk back across the pedestrian footbridge to the old town. There are several of these convenient bridges, so you never have to stray too far to get from one side of the river to the other. It's just a few minutes walk, so it's certainly worth your while to get out of the old town, have a look at the Mirabell Gardens and the view from the hill, and then walk back across the river. You can do the whole thing easily in a couple of hours. It's a very pleasant walk. And at the base of this bridge, there's a very nice little clothing store. And all of the little side alleys of town are lined with stores. So along with the history, there's lots of shopping to be enjoyed here, as always in Europe.